There is a quiet force shaping the person you have become. It is not your education, not your career, not even the relationships you have chosen along the way. It is something older and more persistent than any of these. It is the story you absorbed before you even knew stories existed. A script written in the earliest years of your life, long before memory, long before reflection, long before the ability to question what was given to you. It has lived inside you with a confidence you often lack. It directs you gently, silently, almost invisibly, and most days you follow it without even noticing that you are doing so. This is the world of early childhood scripts, the internal templates formed when your mind was still as soft as warm clay, shaped by the voices, gestures, moods, and silences around you. These scripts do not simply describe your past, they choreograph your present. And until you can see them clearly, they continue to write the future you are unconsciously headed toward. To understand how these early instructions came to be, you would need to return to the very beginning, not the beginning as you remember it, but the beginning as your nervous system recorded it. Because the nervous system remembers before the mind does. It stores impressions long before it stores ideas. It absorbs emotional patterns long before it has words to label them. In those moments when you were too young to resist or question, your body learned how to anticipate the world. It learned what earns love and what risks rejection. It learned which emotions are welcome and which are dangerous. It learned whether closeness is comforting or suffocating. It learned how to protect itself in ways that felt necessary at the time, even if they now cost you dearly. These lessons were never explicitly taught. No one sat down with you and said, "Here is how you should handle conflict. Here is what you must hide. Here is who you should become to remain safe." Instead, you learned through atmosphere, through repetition, through the emotional weather of the home you grew up in. The tone of the household became the tone of your inner world, and the rules of emotional survival you created back then became the rules you carry with you now, often without meaning to. Some people grow up in homes where love feels conditional. Affection arrives only when they perform well, stay quiet, or put others first. They learn to shape themselves into something palatable, something acceptable, something pleasing, and this script continues into adulthood. They become the dependable one, the responsible one, the one who never disappoints, the one who never asks for more than others want to give. Their childhood taught them that the safest way to exist is to be useful, agreeable, and unobtrusive. So they continue this practice long after leaving home, unaware that every yes carries the echo of a yes given decades ago to avoid being a burden. Others grow up in homes where unpredictability reigns. The emotional state of the adults around them shifts without warning. They learn to scan every room, every conversation, every breath for signs of tension. Hypervigilance becomes second nature. They grow into adults who anticipate danger even in calm situations. They mistake peace for the calm before a storm. They apologize before they have done anything wrong. They feel responsible for moods that have nothing to do with them. This is the script of the child who learned that stability does not exist, and that the only way to remain safe is to constantly watch for the moment safety will end. There are those who were taught that their emotions are too much. They heard sighs whenever they cried, impatience whenever they expressed frustration, distance whenever they reached for comfort. They learned to shrink their emotional lives to the smallest possible size. They grow into adults who struggle to identify their feelings, who numb themselves without realizing it, who believe that needing anything from others is a kind of weakness. Their script whispered to them that emotional invisibility is the only path to acceptance. And so that is the path they walk, even when it leads them far from their own hearts. Some learned a different lesson entirely. They were told, through words or silence, that they must be strong for everyone around them. They were handed responsibilities too heavy for a child to carry. They became caretakers long before understanding what care even meant. And in adulthood, they still take on that role. They attract people who rely on them. They hide their struggles. They carry burdens quietly. Their script tells them that love is earned through sacrifice, and so they continue to sacrifice long after the need has passed. Each of these childhood environments produces its own story, its own internal map of the world, and each map feels like the truth, not because it is accurate, but because it is familiar. Familiarity, for the human mind, often feels safer than truth itself. What we learned early is not easily questioned. It becomes the foundation on which we build everything else, and we rarely notice the foundation because we spend most of our lives looking only at the walls above it.
To see the script clearly, you would need to slow down. Not just in the literal sense of pausing your schedule, but in the deeper sense of observing the patterns of your life with gentle curiosity. You would need to ask yourself why you react as you do in certain situations, why you always choose the same kind of partner, why you fear specific forms of closeness, why you tolerate more, or fight harder, or run faster than others do. These behaviors are not random. They are echoes of the child you once were. And the child acted not out of wisdom, but out of necessity. Imagine a person who always puts others first. They may describe themselves as caring, thoughtful, or selfless, and this may be true. But beneath the virtue lies a quieter truth. As a child, they learned that meeting the needs of others protected them from criticism or neglect. And so, in adulthood, they continue to meet needs compulsively, even when it exhausts them. Their script has turned self-sacrifice into a default mode of being. Imagine someone who avoids conflict at all costs. They may describe themselves as peaceful or easygoing. But beneath this identity lies a memory too old to recall consciously, the memory of conflict that felt dangerous or intolerable. Their nervous system learned to avoid tension altogether, and so they walk through adulthood sidestepping confrontation, even when it would bring clarity or freedom. Imagine a person who cannot stay in relationships for long. They may describe themselves as independent. They may say they simply value their space. But beneath this lies a story. Closeness once felt unsafe. Vulnerability once led to pain. So they now retreat before the pain returns. Their script has transformed emotional self-protection into a principle that guides every bond they form. The most striking part of these scripts is how reasonable they once were. They were adaptive responses to environments that did not allow emotional freedom. The child did what they needed to survive, to feel accepted, to feel less alone. The tragedy is not that the child created these coping strategies. The tragedy is that the adult rarely realizes the strategies are no longer necessary. The adult now has choices the child never had. New relationships, new contexts, new possibilities for safety. But the script continues to run because the nervous system believes it is still protecting the same child from the same environment. It does not know that the world has changed. To rewrite the script, you must first recognize that it exists. This is not an intellectual task, but an emotional one. It requires compassion for the younger version of yourself that created these patterns. It requires patience for the slower process of repatterning your inner world. And it requires honesty, the kind of honesty that feels tender rather than harsh, the kind of honesty that whispers, "You did the best you could back then, but you do not have to keep living that way now." The next step is learning to tolerate new emotional experiences. The people pleaser must learn to say no and endure the discomfort that follows. The conflict avoider must allow themselves to disagree and trust that disagreement does not always lead to danger. The emotionally numb must practice identifying their inner state, even when it feels unfamiliar or overwhelming. The hypervigilant must learn to notice when peace is real, not deceptive. These acts are not small. They are rewrites of a story decades in the making. Rewriting these scripts is not about erasing the past. It is about recognizing that you are no longer trapped inside it. It is about acknowledging that the person you needed to be back then was necessary, but the person you need to be now is different. Growth begins at the moment you can thank the old script for what it did for you, while gently setting it down. Sometimes the most powerful change happens not when you become someone new, but when you stop being someone old. When you no longer allow the child inside you to determine the decisions of your adult life. When you realize that safety can come from boundaries, not compliance. That love can come from authenticity, not perfection. That belonging can come from being known, not from being invisible. There is a quiet moment that arrives for many people doing this work. A moment when they catch themselves doing something small but different. A moment when they say no without guilt, or speak up without fear, or allow someone to care for them without feeling undeserving. And in that moment, they realize that the old script is no longer directing the scene. A new scene is being written, one that belongs not to the child of the past, but to the adult of the present. You cannot change the world you were born into, but you can change the world you carry within you. The script may have dictated the beginning of your story, but it does not have to dictate the ending. And perhaps the greatest act of self-discovery is finally asking, not who did I have to become back then, but who am I free to become now?